Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try and make a couple little quick adjustments to the camera. See if I can darken it up a little bit. There. That should maybe make it a little better. We're working on more of this walnut again tonight. I do have a hole. I gotta drill a hole in this one. This widen out. These I cut on the bandsaw, so I have a sort of a center point. So we got to get through the bark into solid wood. So we have a good grip. So we'll drive our center in, either on the floor or on the corner. I usually use the corner of my bench right here. There's a leg right underneath it. So it's good and solid. And I gotta get rid of a center point. I don't use the center point in the live center, as you'll see. It makes it easier to manipulate the piece a little bit. And we're definitely not going to need dust collection at all. Get that turtley out of the road. This is a crotch piece, so it does have a little bit of, looks like it has a little bit of figure. I cut these the other day. I cut up some stuff to take to my local wood turning club. And as I was cutting some logs up, there was one of these logs had a little bit of a crotch to it. It has a little bit of figure, which hopefully will show up as we go along. These are already semi-round, but we definitely have a high side and a low side, which is considerably off. Half an inch. So if we move over about 1/4 of an inch, it should be enough. We'll make a cut down across there and we'll find out whether it was enough. And I probably should just get at least one of the 5/8 gouges out. We got quite a few of these to do, so we can be a bit aggressive or so on some of it. Because these we're going to do rough. We're not going to do the finished thickness on these. I'll leave these about 1 inch thick so that we can come back at a later date and finish them. Everything's good and tight. Everything's free and clear. And drop our speed way down. We're going to speed up till we get some sort of a vibration. I did a pretty good job cutting these. So these are actually sort of a little bit more balanced, maybe. So we're going to cut right now from the top down so we can establish the top. And take your time. Don't want the tool to be bouncing. I go at the speed the tool is cutting. So we start to get the bounce like right there. That means you're going a little too fast. It's starting to make a little bit bigger of a cut down there. So we're just going to slow down a little bit more. And I'm running out of my movement of body. I want the tool against my body the whole time. And we'll see where we're at. I actually cut the whole way up. Not quite the whole way up there. So I think we gotta get rid of the little chainsaw mark too. It looks like we're touching the bark over there. We've cut over there, so I might as well, before I go any further that way, I'm gonna move this over a fair amount that way, probably almost 1/4 of an inch, so that I cut evenly. The way I do these, I want these two wings, the two high points and the two low points, to be pretty close to the same. That way I'll end up with a balanced kind of a bowl. I mean, there's sometimes you might want to do it the other way around, that they're not quite balanced. But the ones that aren't balanced are also much harder to turn because they're not balanced. So that means you can never get it to balance in the lathe. And we can't get it to balance, and we can't bring the speed up. And now I'm assuming that I got things fairly right, so I'm actually making it a little bit of a taper towards the tail end. The cut was getting a little bit big. So just stop, back up, come out, pick up the cut a little bit further out. Out there's one tiny little, I'm sure there's only like one little place that it's cutting as it goes around. So that's why it wants to do what it wanted to do. It looks like since I've cut down into there, I still could move it a little bit more. I'll finish this cut. We'll move it just a little bit more, and then we'll just go around to the bottom and start making our cuts from the bottom to the top. And then we'll see. We're still we're not locked into anything at this point. I'm not even going to try and go off the end because I'll just go around the other from the back side and we'll take that off that way. It'll be a little bit easier. So we got white there, white there. There's the white. So we still need to move this one a little bit more towards me so that it hits that sooner than what it is right now. It's also why I don't use a point in the live center, because right there I only moved it about 1/8 of an inch at most. We're going to have to move the tailstock back a little bit so we can get our tool rest in here. And make sure that we have clearance on everything. Everything's been free. Now we'll get rid of this little bit out here. Of all the moving around that we've done, we certainly have made this down here very much out of whack with the top. So now we'll just flatten that out. And you got to remember it's on the slow speed. I think we'll switch belts tonight for this, because these are about 10 inches across, something like that, 10 or 11 inches. I probably really don't need super high speed, but if I have the power, then I can make bigger cuts at slower speeds. So we're still nowhere close to being flat, and we could easily go to that direction. Back that camera up a little bit more. These are big enough, it's hard to get that clearly on the screen. There we go. You'll be able to see it two-dimensional, two different views. Because most of the work right now is from the back side. It's still not very well balanced up yet. In this particular tool presentation, I can go in both directions. As you can see, I can go forward, I can go backward. You can make a thin cut, a thick cut, but it's not a finishing type cut. There are some really neat looking grain if it stays throughout the drawing process. It doesn't look like it goes, some of it might go up fairly far, hopefully. So now we're flat. Now we're going to have to think about which jaws we're going to use, and they're big enough. We're going to use the bigger jaws. These are going to give me about a 2 and something inch tenon. At this point it doesn't, we can use the bigger ones because we're not really worried about the size of the foot, even though the size of the foot for a bowl this size is probably about that size anyhow. So we're just under 10 inches. So a third of that would be about 3 3/8, something like that. So those jaws are going to do about 2 3/4. Just having a brain thought here. Can I go to the next size? My next size up is quite a jump. And I can always take more wood off later on down the road. You know, they go up to 4 3/8. I don't think so. I think we'll stick with what we got right there. They kind of don't necessarily. And I can leave this tenant a little bit bigger than what I'm going to need at this point. I'll lose a little bit of grip strength on it, but it won't be drastic enough to cause me any issues. So I'm scribing with the left leg. I'm matching up with the right leg. Right leg cannot touch. It's just close. Just trust me, you only let that right leg touch once or twice, because it's, although that's not spinning super fast, but it will take it right out of your hand. I don't care how big and strong you are. It's got the momentum. It's going to come up and over, and chances are it's going to go flying. Hopefully it doesn't stick you as it flies past your head or something along that line. Now we'll get rid of some of this corner. At this point, we're just cutting it off straight, about 45 degrees or so, something like that to the piece. It's giving us some room to work. It's also getting us away from the possibility of even thinking about making it into a dog dish type bowl where this wall would be straight. You'll see a lot of people do these, and this would be their curve from there to there, and then that's straight. It's not what I'm after, not how I make them. It makes it very, if you do it that way, it makes it very difficult on the inside because you have too sharp of a corner in the bottom. Now we should be, this thing is not going to balance at all. Go down. Some of this stuff, since it has so much sapwood, it's probably the case in this one, I'm thinking. So there's heartwood. But the problem is there's more heartwood on that side than there is on this side. So it's a different weight consistency. So it's not going to balance up very well. So in other words, we won't be able to get the kind of speed out of it that I would like. I'm working my way into where the tenant's going to be. Continue to take material off in there. And eventually we need to make this into a nice curve to the top. But we need to know where to go from. So we got to get into where our tenant's going to be. And I use pretty much all tenants. Very few things that I would use a recess on. I mean, for me, the only thing I would use a recess for would be a platter. Because if I was to use a recess on something like this, on the inside there, then I have to leave a whole bunch of material out here to accommodate the pressure that the chuck is going to be putting on expanding outward. So I just don't do that. And this tenon will become the foot of the bowl eventually. If I switch to a smaller gouge, it'll be a little bit more gentle, and it's also sharper. Because the other gouge has now cut a couple miles of chips, a couple miles of wood through the bark, which always has dirt and such in it. So it's time to sharpen the bigger one. So I'll switch to a smaller one, which the smaller one is really what I use the majority of the time anyhow. The smaller one's a 1/2 inch diameter bar. The bigger one is a 5/8. Smaller gouge will give me a little bit more control in some ways. It won't make as big of a cut. The advantage of the bigger gouge is that right there at that point I could sort of keep on going and continue making that cut to the rim. That's about all we need to do with that. Like I say, these are going to be rough turns, so I will leave a little extra meat out here as well. And we're going to leave it about 1 inch thick. So that the plan is to come back and return it a second time once it dries. I have been playing around drying some small stuff in the microwave. I have not tried to do anything of this particular size yet. So I can see right off the bat, excuse me, I've left a hump right there. We could use our trusty little glue stick. That's going to tell me the same thing. And I don't think I can get it in a place where you can see. Ew. Why do I have green? I gotta get back and adjust that camera. And there's something that didn't cooperate. That looks bright green. Let me go in short second. It's yellow, not green. How are we doing tonight, buddy? Come on. Come on. Why won't you let me adjust? Wow, you know you're going to open it up over here. Stupid thing. It's the wonders of having two monitors. It's moving it from one side to the other. It isn't the brightness. What was the other one I changed? Hue? That's one I guess I should not have changed. Yeah, looks more like it. Now we had that open 6 times. There we go. That'll look a little better. Okay. Where were we? Gotta take this hump away. Not totally worried about the shape, but practice, practice, practice. I'll do a shear scraping cut on that hump. So it makes it a little easier because I'm now in direct line with it, so I can see it a little bit easier than where I was positioned at. So we left a ridge up here. We'll take care of that one. And I think, whoa, not quite. A little bit more down here. Now we're just being extra fussy with it, really. Because it's gonna have a lot of movement to it as it dries. So we gotta go in here, clean up our tenon a little bit. Our tenon area more so the area in here where the chuck's gonna grab a hold of. I want that to be slightly concave into that corner. Corner needs to be nice and crisp and clean, because that's really where the chuck actually grabs, is down in that corner. So we want that clean. And we're going to check to see whether we have a little bit of a concave to it, which we don't. If I was to leave that go like that, it's not flat, it's actually tapered a little bit on the outside. So that would mean there'd be 2 points or a point on either side of the tenon that is making contact, where the other 2 points don't make contact. So it can make this bowl actually wobble in the chuck. Not something you want to do. It needs to sit on this surface solidly. That should have it squared away. Yep. It's not a big amount of a concave in there, but it needs to be some, or we won't have the grip that we should have. One more thing. Get rid of a little bit more of that junk in the middle around the live center before we get rid of it. That way it's small enough to go down in the hole in the center of the chuck. We certainly don't want anything on the bottom, hitting the bottom of the chuck. And as you can see, that drive center is driven in there hard enough and solid enough that that bowl is sitting on there by itself. It doesn't take usually a whole lot of force to take it off, but those teeth probably went in there a good solid 1/8 of an inch or more. This is wet greenwood, which is pretty much all I work with as far as bowls go. That way you can get nice big bulb lengths for free. I've seen people use them. It looks like too much exercise for me, but yeah, I've seen some of the videos of people using them. The treadle lathe. What's the other one? There's some other ones that are, what do you want to call it? Human powered. They take a lot of skill to actually use them. Now, somebody uses them all the time. They're probably so used to it, but they don't. The thing with them, they don't spin very fast. So that would make it really, sort of really challenging for me, because I'm used to having constant speed, where those don't necessarily have constant speed. The ones I've seen people using, they normally are using them in a fashion that usually are doing some sort of like spindle type work, or small, really usually normally small stuff. Because I mean, this would wear you out. I mean, this thing probably weighs in, I don't know, 8 to 10 pounds or something like that, maybe, when I started out. So you figure that's the amount of force, that you're going to have to apply to make it spin. Yeah, well, that's the ones I've ever seen doing. That's a lot of what they were doing. A lot of it is the traditional woodworking kind of stuff. So we're going to speed up to where we get a vibration, which still is not going to be very high because of the difference in the densities in this case. So we'll basically drill a hole down through the middle. Making a cone, basically. It's a very nice, simple, easy cut to make because we're cutting into the side of the tree. So we're really not dealing with any end grain. So we'll get nice, big, fluffy chips. We can make a pretty good sized cut, even though it's not going very fast. This certainly is going to dull the tool quickly because once again, we're going through all the bark. As you can see, I'm getting some much finer shavings for some of it. So we'll just kind of bear through it, slow down a little bit, make a little lighter cuts. My dad has been doing a bunch of these bowls, small ones. They're only like 6-inch diameter, 5-6 inches. And he said to me, he said, "You having trouble with this stuff dulling the tool fairly quickly?" And I said, "Yes." So evidently, wherever this tree grew at, was able to pick up some either minerals or silica. Well, that's kind of the hope. I bumped the one. How are you doing this fine evening? Here we go. Must have bumped that one. I thought I had it set right. I can bring this one over here. More of this white walnut. Wasn't really the plan, but so we're gonna, like I say, we're gonna leave these thick. This is gonna be another kind of science project again. I got in trouble yesterday. I was down here working on the dresser that I'm working on. Let's make this, what are we gonna make it? Inch, or a little better. We'll set it about 1.25 inches. And playing around with this thing of drying some of this stuff quickly in the microwave, which I have an old microwave that I brought over. Oh, there you go. Well, I don't know how it is in your household, but I probably wouldn't necessarily get away with that one. I don't know how many kids. I only have one kid, and she's not at home. She has her own life. My wife is over to neighbors playing cards or games or whatever they're doing. I was actually sort of supposed to go over there earlier, and I said, no, I said, I've already started stuff, so have fun. Well, and then if you're like me, you'd really get in trouble because I'd probably just pull my phone out if I wanted to watch something while the concert was going on and just sort of continue watching what I was watching before. And that usually gets me in big trouble too. I make sure I don't have any volume on. So we're going to try and make this as consistent as possible. I'm pretty good down to there so far. And this one here, we've only used the right side, so we're going to go back in here. We're going to clean out some of this. We use up the cutting edge on the left side of the tool. And then we'll probably go sharpen them all. Oh, no, you're right. Like I say, I was working on the dresser, and this microwave is in my shop. I do have one little window in my shop, and I normally have, most of the time when I'm down here working, especially doing like that cabinet work and stuff like that, I'm going to create the trusted airborne dust. I usually have that window. It's an old window that folds, old basement window that's this type that folds in, so it's not real big, and it doesn't open very far. But I have a tiny little fan that I've had for years that is sort of kill proof, I think. And my God, the thing is probably, I'd hate to say how many years old it is. And it's the only thing it's ever done. And it's right across from my workbench. But I don't think I even had that fan. I might have had that fan on. But the microwave is right there. And I had a bunch of these little walnut balls. And I was nuking them for 30 or 40 seconds at a time. And on the routine of, 30 seconds in, about somewhere between 15 minutes and a half an hour, generally when I get back around to it. So I'm in here. I don't necessarily smell it, but I'm like, well, let's start. I got a little bit of aroma to it. The next thing you know, she's yelling down the steps at me. She says, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? What am I doing?" She goes, "You got the house stunk up like crazy." I'm like, "Oh." So I walked outside of my shop door, and I'm like, "Wow, I can really smell it out here." So I ended up. My spray room, where I would spray cabinets, is beside this room, and it has a big 40-some inch long window, and a big window fan in it. So when I spray finish, I have a filter on it, and I turn that on, so it's drawing all the airborne particles of finish out the window, which is water based, so it dries like instantly. I ended up turning that on, and I moved the microwave over there so that the aroma went out the window. But I am having actually pretty good luck with doing that. I probably will continue to do more of it. I have not tried, well, the ones I'm working on right now, and there's 4 of them. And like I say, it's more this same walnut. They're just smaller pieces. But 2 of them are about an inch. I left them about an inch thick. So I'm assuming it's going to take a little bit longer for those couple to dry. Because what I do is I put them in the microwave and, like I say, 30 seconds, 40 seconds at a time. And then I pull them out carefully because I know at the 30 seconds, they're warm. If you had sensitive fingers, they're quite warm. At 40 seconds, mind you, only 10 seconds more, they are hot. They are hot to the touch. And generally, they're starting to steam at 40 seconds. So, and I just pull them out, sit them there on the table, and let them cool, air dry cool for, the half an hour, something like that. And that's why I was doing it over here, because that way I see them, and I don't get wrapped up in what I'm doing and then forget about them and not get them back in for another cycle. So probably doing them, I'm probably just going to have to set an alarm or whatever, or use a timer on my phone so that I don't forget them, because they're out in the air. So I'm assuming that they will start to dry out on their own in a natural environment, which means they could be drying out a little bit too quickly. But I mean, so far it actually has worked quite well. Had a couple of them have cracked, but there again, I don't necessarily think it's because of the microwaving. It's probably because the cracks are already there. The 2 little ones both have cracks in, but there was a tiny little bit of the pith that was at the very top edge of them. So that was no surprise that they cracked a little bit. But they didn't crack the whole way down the side of the bowl or something like that. They just cracked a little bit at the top. So once I get them dry, I'll mix up some colored super glue and I'll just fill that crack in before I start give them the second turning, because those there are, like I say, 3/4 to an inch thick. Wood can track even when the kiln dry, but went down the country today. That was one of the things on my little hit list for the week, was to go down a lumber place and also builds furniture and stuff like that. They're almost an hour away from me. It's a young guy. And if you're on Instagram, yeah. Well, especially like I say, those two little ones both had a little bit of the pith left in them. The pith. So that's a good place for the crack to start. But this young guy, I don't know really how old he is, because he looks like he's quite young, maybe 30s, something like that, early 30s, would be my guess. But we were down there several years ago from, my dad belongs to a woodworking club down the country a little ways, and they had a little thing that they went over there on a Saturday, and he showed, what he was doing, what he, some of the stuff that he has. And it was almost, and it's been a couple years since we've been down there for that, but he really has grown. It sounds like his business is kind of like booming, which to me is a great thing, but he's now importing logs. He's working with an importer from somewhere, and he is getting exotic woods. He has some of the black and white ebony. He had some mahogany down there. And you'll like this, because you do some cabinet work and some high-end work. He had some mahogany. He really didn't say where the mahogany came from. It's imported. But he said it's the real thing. It's real mahogany. And it was curly. I mean, curly like you would not believe. He had a couple, I guess there would have been like 1x6 boards or something like that standing there. He says, "What do you think of that?" I'm like, "That's cool." I said, I also see that the price tag is at the top of that board. And I said, "That's nice, dude." I said, "But, that's out of this old man's price tag." Now the price was on it. The price was on it. How much do you think? We'll call it a 1x6, 8 feet long. Like I say, curly mahogany. Curly as in seriously curly. No, there was no straight grain in that entire board. And he had a whole bunch of it. Want to guess? Dollars. One board. Yep. A 1x6. Curly mahogany. Curly mahogany. Yep. And I didn't think of it that way. Wow. Now you got to make me get the calculator out on that one. So 1. Wow. How about $48.75 a board foot? That board was $195 for one board. I'm like, you're crazy. My wife was texting me too. Come get the dog. No, she called me. I'm assuming she brought her back. And I'm like, wow. Yeah. Well, see, you were close. You were even higher than what I would have thought. But I told him. Of course, he wanted to know what I was looking for. I'm like, we just come down to see what kind of crap you were doing these days, and see what if there was anything that was of interest. Mahogany. Yeah, I've had some over the years. Just small pieces. I've never done much with the mahogany. Actually, my dad probably did more than what I've ever done with it. He made some clocks out of it years ago. A friend of my grandmother's at that time, and this would probably go back, whew, best into 40 years. She had some. I don't even know where she got it at. She actually had some true Philippine mahogany, and these were like big, kind of like 8-quarter or something like that chunks that were like 20 inches wide or something, if I remember right. And she wanted something, a mantle clock made out of it. So he screwed around and he didn't have the equipment like I would, like of today, that I would have to be able to deal with that. So he literally took, he only needed like half-inch thick. So he just ripped like a little over half-inch thick strips, glued all this stuff together, because mahogany doesn't really have a whole lot of, I don't know what you want to call it, character in the grain, be what I would call it. So he made a clock out of it that time. It seems like it's fairly soft, so it's fairly easy to work with. I don't imagine that curly stuff would be overly easy to work with. But he didn't say whether he actually got it out of Honduras. He didn't say where he got it. Well, I know that's where most of the mahogany was coming from in years past. But I was thinking that was the Honduran mahogany was one of them things, or one of them places that they were no longer allowed to log that stuff. Because I know there's a lot of those rainforest places that they've really have got in big trouble because they don't. Yeah, well, that's sort of what it left me to believe, that the whole. I mean, he had a pretty good size, pretty decent, pretty. It, the way he made it sound, it evidently came out of one tree, or one log, I should say. And not necessarily. I don't imagine by the amount that he had, unless he's already sold a bunch of it. I don't think that he got the whole tree, because the bigger, thicker boards, he had some 8-quarter in the same thing. They weren't plain, but he said they were the same. They were the really curly stuff. But he said that was all out of one log. He said, which, and he looked at me and says, as you know, that's very unusual to get. Well, yeah, I don't. Evidently, maybe it's a little bit more common nowadays. I don't know. Like I say, I thought I was surprised when he had it, and because I'm like you, I didn't think that there was any of that available anymore because of the destruction of the rainforest that they were doing to get some of that stuff. But he said it's all legal stuff that he's getting, because he's getting a whole bunch of different exotic stuff. He had some. What did he call the other one? Chechen? He said that's really neat stuff too, but I think that was even more expensive yet. Of course, he had the black and white. Oh, this is going to be interesting. This is a crotch piece. Right here's the two crotches. Yeah, it would be Good Woods Lumber. He's out of Stewartstown, Pennsylvania. If you're on Instagram, he's quite often putting posts on Instagram of some of the stuff that he's gotten a hold of. He also has two of them eye dry kilns as well. So it's all being vacuum dried in a kiln. So we have a couple of these to do. I'm going to make just a couple little cuts on this, and then we're going to go sharpen things up and get rid of some of these chips at my feet. But I told him I was more interested in seeing what kind of, because I know he gets some burl stuff. But there again, the people that are dealing with the burls in his situation, in the lumber situation, they're most likely going to cut cookies out of them, or maybe a slab or something like that. And he did have some slabs with some really nice burl in them. I'm like, I'm more interested in the burl cap. I said, for what I do, would be to do them as something to be able to cast into smaller pieces. He's like, I really don't have much of that stuff. But he did take me around and show me some of the stuff he had. And he had, trying to remember some of the names. Interesting. You take some weight off of it and you get more unbalanced. But I forget them. I wish I could remember. But they were huge burls. Yeah, I mean, I get that, but these one, and I really didn't get to look at the top of them because they were sitting up on top of a stack of lumber. But they were probably the best end of 5 inches thick or something like that. Like I say, they were probably, I don't know that they were totally, I don't think they were actually totally round. They were a little bit, to me, they looked like they should have been a little bit oblong. This is going to be interesting. This is what we're going to try and leave in this one, is to leave that void. I got to get it down to round first. But I'm like, well, that's a little bit big for my liking. I said, but just out of curiosity, I said, what would it set me back to purchase one of them? He said, you're looking at about 14 grand a piece. I'm like, yeah, okay. He said, hey, somebody will come along and buy them. He's right on the border of Maryland, for one. And he said, there's plenty of people that are building high-end stuff. Yeah, how about it? It's like, wow, dude. But I did buy two little pieces from him. I bought a piece of another piece of curly maple off of him. And this piece is actually the Norway maple, which is the hardest of the maples in the maple family, according to my forester guy. And it's just crazy curly. It was just a small piece. It was about 1 3/4 thick and I don't know, maybe 6 inches wide and 18 inches long, something like that. That was reasonable. That was $10. And I said, when I walked in, and I said, I saw over there in your other room, I said, you had some Buckeye burl. Yeah, he said, Buckeye burl is really expensive. It has become so popular that the price is just ridiculous on it. And I'm thinking, okay, here's somebody telling me that is ridiculous when he just told me these other two burls are $14,000. And he says, well, let's go over here and show me what you were talking about. I said, dude, I just want the little one. I said, I want the cap. Matter of fact, it's over here. Let me go to sharpen this stuff. I'll show you what it looks like. Not real thick. It's not, it's not giant size. And I'm like, I can get a lot of different little stuff out of it. At least the way I looked at it. So that was my plan on that one. But that little piece was $25, which my dad just kind of looked at me and said, I wouldn't pay $25 for that. And my mother, but both my parents went along with us today, and he's like, that thing is just ugly, because it's got all the knobs on it and everything else like the burl would have. And she thought it was ugly. I'm like, well, you wait and see what dear little Sonny makes out of that, and maybe you won't think it's so ugly. But slabs, he got into that, and he was really getting hot and heavy in that when we were there years ago. And it's just like the room that he stores this stuff in, or displays it, I guess you would say, is not giant size, but there was probably still a couple hundred slabs in there, all different kinds of woods, a lot of domestic woods. I don't know. I would assume that I know there was some stuff that would have been some of the exotic woods as well. But I said to him, like, did you like quit sawing regular everyday lumber? He says, no. He says, that's all along the back of the wood, back of the building. Oh, yeah, it was. You could spend a small fortune there. Like I say, he's really nice. He's a young guy. That's what my wife says. Come on, we got to go. He said, you're holding this guy up. I said, I told him to go back to doing what he was doing. I said, I walk around and look. I said, I wasn't even up in the shop part where they actually do, they do some actual work. A lot of his work, I think, from the pictures I've seen him post, are doing a lot of big, like, counters and stuff like that. And he'll do the big counters because now everybody seems to think that, whatever we do, it's got to be big and heavy and clunky as far as I'm concerned. But they do a bunch of them. And he's always buying machinery. That's what my dad says. Yeah, I can't believe he keeps buying it. I said, there's a young man. If they keep going what he's doing, I said, he's got a long, lustrous career doing what he's doing. I said, because you sort of read between the lines that whatever money that they're generating in their business is going right back in their business, rather than some of the younger generation people would take that money and, you know, buy fancy cars and boats and houses and all that stuff rather than putting all the money back into the business. And he seems like he's just the opposite, that his money is staying in that business and just keeps improving and sort of upscaling the equipment. He posted a picture a while back that he bought a 30-inch planer that was, did he tell me today, 50 years old. So it's those big giant sized cast iron planer, and it was double headed. But I'm always cruising the Facebook marketplace to see what people are selling, and generally I'm looking for something I need, like a hole in the head of, you know, more wood, more free wood, basically. But I saw he had that on marketplace, and I recognized the machine, and I'm like, there can't be that many people around that would have something like that, and now he's selling it. So I asked him today, I'm like, so you're selling that big planer? He said, nope, it's already gone. Trying to think what he started out at. 30-some thousand for it. And the last post, I think it was down to like 28,000, maybe less than that. And I'm thinking, wow. I said, you didn't keep that very long. He said, no. He said it wasn't really what he thought it was. And I just kind of looked at him and I said, that's when he told me it was the double head, had a head on the top, head on the bottom. But he said the head on the top was here, the head on the bottom was like right here. He said it wasn't the jointer planer. I don't know if you know anything about them, but there's planers out there, thickness planers out there that are made. They're very expensive, but they do a super job. They call them a joiner planer, where the joiner, the bottom cutter would be about a foot or so behind the top cutter head. So as it comes in, it's basically running across the joiner flatways on the bottom, and then the top finishes it off. The one outfit that I bought lumber from years ago, they had one, and it was neat. So that one was very modern, had digital readout, digital controls, and it did a superb job, planing, going from whatever inch thick, or maybe a little, I think theirs was actually a little, which most of the time they're a little over an inch. And I think I had it planed down to 13/16 at that time. And, it was I think the first go around, he said it wrong, and he actually went below it or something like that. But it was pretty much one pass through that planer from 1 inch thick down to 13/16. And it was, at that time, I'm sure the cutters were very sharp, because it came out the other end that had very little, planer marks in it, and it was very flat. So it was neat. But that's what he said his next move is to get one of them. Actually, I think he said it's even ordered, but he said they are rather expensive, which I could imagine. I want to say the one that he bought, I think he said was like 50,000 or something like that. So, you got to be making some pretty good money if you're investing, $50,000 into, one piece of equipment to buy it new. But it's always, to me, it's always good to see somebody's business like that that has enough business sense to make the business grow, which I was very well pleased to actually get down and talk to him. Not that it would make any difference to me, but I'm always, I always think that's neat that if somebody has the vision and the energy to do what he's doing, and make a business like that grow and thrive, especially in these times of, the younger generation doesn't want to wait for anything to happen, and it sounds like his business has grown and is thriving. So to me, that's always a plus to see somebody, thrive at what they enjoy doing. I'm sure it's probably hard on his home life because I know he does have a wife and I think he has some kids, and because I'm sure he's working a shit ton of hours every week in between, doing stuff at the shop, and somewhere along the line he's got to saw wood, and probably every 2 weeks or something like that, depending on what he's drying. And you got to unload the kiln and reload the kiln. And like I say, there's 2 of them. I don't know if you've ever seen any pictures of them. They're quite interesting. They're not as big as the big super manufacturing kind of kilns. They're basically this big square box or rectangular box. But if I remember right, I think he said it would hold. They hold around somewhere around 2,000 feet, 2,000 board feet of lumber. They're just a big square box. But let me go. I'll show you these 2 pieces of wood. Let's go back to there and get a little bigger view of it. Here's the piece of Buckeye burl, which has all the burleys on top. It's going to cause me a little bit of work because that's still a little bit of bark on there. But there's the bottom side. There's if you've ever seen any of that, that's what will end up being really comes out like super blue. And it does go up fairly well in through it. It had some nice figure in it, but I figure I can get $25 worth of use out of it, I'm sure. The other one is the piece of Norway maple, which has some really nice streaking in it. Which I looked at that and I'm like, well, there's more of them ice cream scoop handles or something along those lines. So, there again, I will get my money back out of them, I think. Of course, the Buckeye one, that'll cause me more work, but because if I'm going to do it casting wise, then I'll have to dry it, stabilize it, and I get a trash bag. But it's the piece of burl, the big end of it is big enough, and that's what my dad was saying. He says, well, now where are you going to start at? I'm like, well, right off the bat, you got the big end of it is about 2.5, 2 3/4 high. I said, so if I take a 3-inch square chunk out of that end and a little bit further back, I said, I could make another blank for another lidded box. So I said, he goes, oh, okay. And I said, the other ones, the further back you get, I said, they can be turned into, handles for something. either ice cream scoops or bottle openers. I mean, you could go back even into like pen blank size, although I don't do very many pens, but maybe I could make the blanks and have somebody that would be interested in the blank, because there is some pen turners at our club. So it won't go to waste. Okay, now we have somewhere for our feet. It's been an interesting week of vacation. Oh, here is the, tell you one more thing before we go back to work. We bring it down so you can see it up close and personal. There is the, let me get it over where it belongs. There's the ice cream scoop handle from the other night that I played around with and dyed and all that good stuff. This actually has the finish on. This has been buffed. The end has not been buffed yet. But I think this is going to end up being a, I don't know, a file handle or something along those lines. Because that hole, if you were along for that adventure the other night, that hole was just entirely too big for the ice cream scoop. Even though I followed their daggone directions, it doesn't suit me. So for me, if it doesn't suit me, then it's not going to go anywhere as far as I'm concerned. So that's sort of where we're at with that. So we're back to this. So let's cut some of this corner off. This is, as Lyle Jamieson would say, he actually has an IRD, I think, this coming weekend. This will be a heart-shaped bowl. Since there's going to be a void in there, this is going to give us sort of a heart shape. I've done some like that before. They're kind of a little different to do. Let's go back to the big gouge. But once again, I'll probably do this one the same way I did the other one. We'll just leave it. We'll just cut it and leave it thick. It does have bark inclusion coming down in there, into there. So we will have to be a little bit cautious and make sure that those inclusions are not going to go farther down in there that we could create a bit of a safety issue. I think this one's a little bit better in balance than the other one, but yeah, my my wood chip guy. He's probably gonna love me when I go back to work next week. Because as it stands right now, I have 2 contractor-sized bags of chips. I cleaned my dust collector out yesterday, which filled up 3/4 of a bag of very fine dust. Cleaned a filter. That was an unfortunate, quite a bit of time yesterday spent just doing that because I sort of put it off. I have the pleated filter on the top of on my dust collector. So they just sort of, the more fine dust that goes in it, the quicker it sort of clogs them up, and then they're less efficient. And it's been a while since I cleaned it, but I used the shop vac down here on some of it because we had some rain. So I couldn't go outside with it. But eventually it quit raining and I was able to go outside and use the leaf blower and I actually got it very clean, which is kind of unusual. I usually give up quicker than that, but that also meant I didn't get quite as much done to the dresser as what I would have liked. But it's all kind of necessary evil. So we'll get in here to our tenant. It could be a bit of an issue with some bark inclusion. There's also a little bit of flame figure starting to show up there. So that's kind of a plus. It does look like most of the bark inclusion that's up higher is going to go away. So now we know where our tenant's going to be. I don't think that's going to be that's something I normally like to see. I really don't necessarily want to go smaller. It's already not real thick to start with. Let's see what we can do here to get the shape what we want. A little bit more up there yet. Plenty wet. Not. I don't feel water hitting my arm, so it's not quite that wet, but it's not far from it. I guess we'll leave a little bit more in there. For good measure. And then we come in, pick up our cut so that we get a nice clean bevel supported cut. Yeah. Makes it challenging when you get up in that top part of that, when the speed of the lathe is very slow. Really hard not to push too hard because it started to bounce, but looks like we did all right. Could possibly clean this up a little bit here. Make sure that we look like we got the shape that we want. So that when we come back in several months from now to finish it up, this thing is like totally white. Tiny bit of a little dark up there. Hard to imagine that it's walnut. It's black walnut. I guarantee you, you have people looking at that at a craft show or whatever, and they'll be like, "That's not black walnut." Like my forester guy would have very much a disagreement with you on that. Even the guy that we're at today, my dad was telling him that this black walnut has so much white in it. And he's like, "Are we talking just sapwood white?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "But it's almost all white." He says, "Oh." He's like, "I've never seen any that look like that." Because he's, there again, he's buying more, getting more premium stuff. Although he used to, and I didn't ask him whether he's still doing that. He has some tree people, tree trimming people, I guess you would call them, that he gets logs from. He's not afraid to do the urban logging, as they would want to call it, and get, big old growth logs that came out of residential areas. He said, "Yeah," he said, it might cost you some money, but he said, "You can get some really super, super nice stuff because the trees are over 100 years old." So, he says, "Yeah, I might, if he's doing slab, he has a chainsaw slab mill." He said, "So, he said, I might, it might cost me a chain if I hit something big and gnarly in it, a big chunk of steel, or the worst one for him to hit is those white resistors that they would have used on light or electric stuff back in the day, because they're ceramic." And I've been told that by several different people in the lumber world as far as cutting stuff like that. And they said they're the worst. You hit one of them, it will literally trash a blade. He said you might as well stop and start either sharpening teeth. If it was a circular sawmill, they would just resharpen teeth. Or he said it may take, I gotta switch tourists. One old guy that I got some lumber sawed years ago, the teeth on his circular sawmill were replaceable, each individual teeth. And he said, "You hit one of them resistors," he said, "they're going to take about a half a dozen or so teeth right off before you can get the mill slowed down enough and get it away from it." But We'll get the inside of this out. See where we're at time-wise. 7:45. Should be able to get one more done. I have about, I counted down there, I think I have 5 or 6 of these about this size down here. Not to mention another dozen of them that I took along to the wood turning meeting the other night and ended up nobody wanted them. And I had to seal the ends of those this evening, and put them away. Stack them and strip them. It wasn't my intent because I wouldn't have cut them. I just left them. The other stuff is actually in logs that are about 5 feet long. So I can just leave them in that log until I'm ready, because they're in the shade for the most part. So I might lose a couple inches off the end, but that's okay. I'll lose that anyhow. Trying to get it to go a little bit faster than what it was. Can be a scary thing to actually go. You can, when you pick up the vibration, you can go, a lot of times you can go faster and the vibration will equalize itself out. In this case, it didn't. It was sort of equalizing itself out, but still quite a bit of vibration. So we'll just go a little slower. And we can stop and take a look where we're at. I think we're close, quite close to where we need to be. Oh yeah, we got to take about one more cut. And thereabouts. Get it down to our inch category or so. Can be fatter than the inch, but it needs to be very consistent. Can't be an inch at the top and a half an inch at the bottom, or it will crack. That's one of the things that I found over the years and I was taught that from the very start. You have to be consistent thickness as you go down through, especially dealing with wet stuff, or the chances of it surviving are very, very slim. So we'll just go down a little bit, stop, measure, and we're getting thinner at the bottom. That's not a good thing. I went down too far. Then I'm going to have to come back up to the top and take a little bit more off the top right up in here. Which is okay. Like I say, I just want it to be consistent. Right now I'm off probably the best end of 1/8 of an inch, which is enough to cause me aggravation. So we'll take another 1/8 of an inch off up at the top. And it started to get thin down in about there. So we'll just feather that out to nothingness down there. And we'll give it another check on this beautiful white walnut bowl. I'll reset my calipers a little bit. We're pretty good. We're going to call it good enough. All we're going to have to do now is take off that very center portion. That'll be done. Maybe we'll do something really weird on. I gotta reset the rest. I'm working with the next. I'm gonna finish it out with the bottom bowl gouge because I'm working hard on trying to get it mastered to use because it can be sort of aggressive. It will remove a lot of material at one time, and the flute does not stay clean. I'll just sort of flatten it across there. I'm not really trying to make a curve at this point. So we get back out the outside and where we can see what the curve is going to look like. This is more how I would explain it. And we can be a little thinner down there at the bottom because we have excess material down there plus a tenon. I have a hard time getting it to pick up the cut there we go. Behind, I still didn't totally get it. I want to pick up the cut behind where I stopped at and go through that to make it a nice finished cut. And that should be good enough for a rough turn piece. Certainly wouldn't be good enough for, right about where we need to be. Certainly is not. It's still a little bit on the flat side down there. What would like to stick to these two. So we'll try and pick up our cut up in here. And at the slow RPMs, it's running even slower yet down there. That's why you got to keep on going super slow. Try and get through the middle. There we go. That tool will give a pristine finish if you do it right down in there. You can see going across the bottom of the bowl, there'll be tiny little bit of torn, disturbed grain there in the center. I was having trouble seeing what I was doing, but that's a really nice finish that you get right off of the tool. Require minimal sanding. Of course, this is going to be left to dry. Hard to imagine that's black walnut. Does have a little bit of figure there showing up. Tiny little bit in here. Kind of like some black that bled through from the bark into there, but so we'll put it in its trusty paper bag and let it take a nap till we can get back to it. So 6:15. I try and always remember to mark the tenant, what it is, when it was done. I'm trying really hard to do that with everything, especially the logs that I may get. Half, like tonight, those are half logs. I guess the question is, let's do that. The old guy that gave me the wood, I get to call him the old guy because he'll be 90 in September versus my 61 right now. But his birthday is right close to mine, so he'll be 90, I'll be 62. So he's still the old guy in my book. And I saw him on Tuesday evening, and he asked me how I was making out with whether I got some of this stuff done or turned anyhow. And I'm like, yeah. I said, dude, I said, you're gonna have so many little itty bitty bowls, because that's what he said he wanted. He wanted a bunch of the 6-inch bowls and stuff like that. That bark's gonna come off. This one we're gonna do something different. Get over there a little bit further. This is like a cookie, what all these people nowadays want to call a cookie. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn an end grain bowl. It won't be really very rounded. This thing already has some cracks in it. But we'll give it a shot. Of course, the challenge on this one is going to be marking a center point. Finding something close to center. So we can use our dividers and set them at a point out there on the edge of the, probably should go to the edge of the wood, not the edge of the bark, where it looks like it could be center. So that's not quite center. So we'll go about half that distance. And then I'll move over to there. Come back over to there. Okay, that's centered that way. That's not very well centered that way. So that means we need to go over to about there. Oh, that's what I was afraid of. I was going to go right down in that. There's a little, that's the pith that's sort of rotten. So I guess that's going to become our center point. Not necessarily what I wanted the center point to be, but it's been a very long time since I've done any of these like this. We'll have a go with it. I'm not even going to try and pound that center in. I'm just going to put it up, and I'll put some pressure. Tailstock pressure will drive them in, at least enough to make this drive. That looks good enough. Get the tool rest around this side. And all of our cuts are going to go from the outside to the inside so that we're slicing across the end grain. And this one will go to final thickness. I'm not concerned about the bark. The bark is going to come off because I will probably go down, probably will make this in the neighborhood of 1/8 of an inch thick, even though we're starting with actually a pretty good sized piece. This piece is actually fairly well balanced. So we're going to clean up this face. This face will probably be the top. We want it to be clean. And we need a tenant. And now I messed up my calipers. So this will have a black dot in the center of it. At least that's the plan. So we're going to need, this one will actually need 2 tenants because I'll put a tenant on this side. It's almost where we needed it to start with. So if I go back, I quit doing that, quit laying tools, laying it in the table behind here. There's where a lot of the chips go whenever I'm doing the inside of the bowl. So what we need, I don't need to go the whole way back out to the end. We need a little bit more of a tenant than that. And it needs to be a little bit smaller. And we'll clean it up. They're little spindle gouge. Because it will allow me to go in, because this now I'm cutting into end grain. So the parting tool will not do a very nice, it does not want to go in, it would not want to go in there very well. And all that material will go away eventually. So that should be that. And this is going to fall off. I think, yeah, I'm going to say it's not going to sit up there like the bowls were because there's enough there to make it dry, but it's certainly not digging in like the side grain would be at the bowl. Side grain bowls would do. And we might bring the tailstock back up for just a little bit on this one, just so I get it totally in balance. Get that to sit on the bottom jaw. Like our tenant could have been a little bit smaller, but that's okay. Because it will compress this because this is it's side grain all the way around. So this is one of them times where we're going to stop. We'll be stopping and checking and retightening the tenant quite a bit. So now this will become our bottom. But first order of business is the same as what we just did on the top. We're going to clean up this bottom first. And make it parallel. Basically, we're going to make it parallel to that side so that we have an even surface to work with. That looks okay. So we're going to go out here. This is pretty uneven. Uneven right there. You hear it going a little thumping and ticking. And I'll stop and check. Sounded like we were. It's got an interesting streak coming across there. That's the other interesting thing with this. You can see all the little like black streaks in it. Where I guess it was, I don't know if it's sort of trying to become the nice black of the walnut, but some of it has it, some of it don't. So now we'll start to shape it. This is going to be, like I say, this is going to be pretty much a straight, sort of a straight sided bowl. It'll be more like a bell-shaped, flat bell shape, I guess you would call it. I learned this from a guy down in Baltimore. My dad and I talked my dad into taking a class with him. And he asked me that day, because it was a beginner's class, and he's like, I can see I need to find something to challenge you because you're certainly don't need to be in a beginner's class. And I'm like, well, I just been down to so that my dad would actually take a class. And he had me do, I think, like 2 of these. I did one, regular bowl with the class. That would be kind of rude otherwise. But then he had me do some of these and showed me a bunch of the ones that he did. And he says, you should be doing end grain bowls. He said, once you get it figured out to do them, he said they're easy to do. And he said nobody does them because they don't understand the philosophy of how to do them. And he said you can get some. I mean, this won't be. It'll be sort of wavy. There's little dips and everything in that. But he said you can get some wood, and one of the woods that you could get that if you can ever find any of it is the red cedar, because it'll have like big knobs on the outside of it. So they really will show up on something like this. Of course, if the bark decides it's going to come off at this point, I'm gonna eat the bark. The bark's going to whack me. But I am directly in line of, basically I'm directly in line of fire with it. Really the only way I can see the shape develop. That tool's starting to get dull. So we're getting just a nice sort of gentle curve to it. I've left a little bit extra meat right there. I also need to size this tenon a little bit so that we know where we're going to go to down here. Tenon's probably, yeah, it's right, it's already right just about what we need it to be for that. So we need to make it into a dovetail. So there's our tenon. We could make this outer ring, we take some more off and make that our foot. I think what we're going to do. Not necessarily a good idea to move the tool rest any given time. This one I'm not moving to where I'm going to hit something out there. So it is a little bit safer to do. I'm just sort of making nice light cuts. You don't need to be in a giant size hurry. And I'll just go into that little protrusion in there. I'll make one more. I'm going to make that just a little bit deep, a little bit thicker than what it is. I think that would look nice if that was a little beaded area there. I should be able to do everything to that I want to do, I think, if I remember correctly. I think he said you could do whatever you want. If you want to put it like this, in this case here, I'm going to put a beaded foot on here. There is no, in his philosophy, there is no sanding on these things. So you need to use sharp tools, clean cuts. We have no torn grain. We have a little bit, this is all end grain, so it's kind of a little bit fuzzy. He said once they dry, you could actually go back and, if you wanted to, go back and sand on them a little bit. His philosophy was that he did not. He would just leave them dry, and he said they'll be dry in a couple weeks, and then you can put I think he was using like an oil type finish on them or something, and leave them go at that. And yeah, I didn't leave myself quite enough tailstock room. I just could have taken the tailstock away. It would have been okay too. So I need to get in here really nice and close so that I don't drop off the edge, because now we're going to use our spindle gouge and create a bead in there, preferably without whacking ourselves with the bark that's sticking out here. And we can make the bead come around from the other side. Only we should be going in that direction. It's a little hard because I know I can't necessarily get in there the way I want to. Maybe we'll just make it like a little tapered foot. Would be a little easier. Just a little bit of something so that it sits up off the table a little bit. We should already have a little bit of a concave in there because we did that for the tenon. And that should be okay. And it's not very cleanly cut there. So we're going to do have to address that. Like I said, there is no going back after, really going back after the fact. I probably should just take it easier. Make the whole thing tapered. Into that corner. Make it like a nice little crisp corner in there. And that should be good, and that should be good. Don't touch it, you dumbass. So we'll grip it with this. That will go away eventually. This will become our foot. At least that's the plan. Like I say, a very gentle curve. And then we'll come back and remove all the material from the other side. This blank is certainly probably way thicker than what it needs to be. And like I say, it's been a long time since since I've done any of these. And this was sort of the end, in some ways, this is like the end cut off of a log. Not the end cut that I would have started with, because there would have been cracks in it, although there is some cracks in it now. Not real. I think we've gotten rid of all the cracks. A little bit left right there in that tenon. But these little end checks, they don't go very deep. At least at this point, they don't go really deep, very deep. You let the log sit around way longer than what this one has been around, then they will get deeper. That tenon could actually be a lot smaller. But we're not locked into that. We'll just turn this back around. Put it right back in where it was at. And then shrink that tenon down a little bit more. My short tool rest. Because there's no point in that being that oversized. Like I say, I have a lot of tools that are actually sort of short-handled. They're doing different stuff like this. Don't necessarily pay in this case, because it's sort of making it a little bit more difficult. Okay. So I might go ahead and get rid of that little bit there while we're at it. That's all right. We could shoot. Oh, that's right. This is the stupid thing with the pith in the middle. So before I move everything, I'm going to put the live center back in. And I'll bring it up and mark it so that I know where the rotten. It looks like that's actually a little bit rotten right there even. But I'll still give it a nice mark so that when we get this done on the other side, I have a place, hopefully. Maybe we should have looked at that a little harder, because it definitely has a nice rotten spot right there, which is probably going to make a challenge for the other side. But now our tenon's more the right size. Still could be a tad smaller, but that'll be okay. We have more like 3/16 or so there. So if we did everything right, this still should be true, and it is. So for those people that say you can't take a piece of wood out of a chuck and put it back in and get it to run true, they need to work on their methods. because you should be able to. Oh, don't want the bark. Don't want the bark to hit things. Let's see if we have enough edge left to get through the bark. If we change something, we're going to slow the speed down. And we're going to stop. There's definitely a piece of, there it is, loose piece of bark, because you can hear it ticking down there. Like I say, I'm sure this bark will come off when we go thin. It won't take long for it to come off. So now we've gotten things much more in balance. We're able to bring the speed up considerably. And we can make some little steps if we want to. I will leave that very center alone for now. It's still a good idea to have the extra support in there. We're going to stop here after that cut. We're going to do two things. We're going to go sharpen. I'm going to try and pop this. Let's see if I can get this bark to come off, because I know it won't stay. There we go. It'll peel. It should peel right off. In other words, otherwise it's sort of creating a problem for me, because I know it's going to come off, and I don't necessarily, because I really want to stand. I want my head to be in line with this, so I can look left side, right side. Left eye, right eye, I guess you would say, more so. So I want to be able to come out here. I want to be able to stand more in the area out here to see what I'm doing. The other thing, that tool was dull. So let's cheat. We'll just go back to the 1/2 inch one that we didn't hardly use yet. But I still don't really want to get rid of that. I might have to switch to a shorter. I'll just switch to a shorter tool rest, because I want to leave the mass in the middle as long as I possibly can. It'll help dampen some of the vibration and give it support in there. I probably could even go shorter in tool rest than that yet. I'm going to take some of this away, and then we're going to thin this down to our 1/8 of an inch, thereabouts. See the difference in the sharpness of the tool? A nice big chip coming off rather than sort of starting to get dust. But I was sort of being, in some ways, being lazy, but I also wanted to get beyond the crap that's in the bark. So now let's work on getting that. I move my tool rest so that I'm sort of parallel with the outside. I'm looking down this side, looking at my tool rest, and I'm making them parallel. So all I have to do basically is follow my tool rest at this point, and I'm following the outside profile, if that makes sense. It makes sense to the one person, and that's me. And that's one of the things I was taught to do. So now we're going to start thinning this down. Slow and easy. There's actually probably a bigger cut than what I should have made. So my eye says we're down to about a quarter. Yeah. It didn't pick up the cutout there very well. This becomes the challenging part, is to pick up the cutout here, because now it's all wavy and bumpy. It probably can, a couple things it can do. I could get the light, the bright light, which we may do here. I gotta plug it in now. That's one of the ways to be able to go and get really creatively thin, is to put a bright light behind it, and you will be able to see the light coming through the wood. I can already, if I come around to this side, I can already see that I'm probably thinner right there than I am out there, which is not necessarily what I want it to be. So if I bring my bright light over here, and hopefully don't blind myself or the camera. So what can we see on this side? We can see that it's darker here than it is there at this point. So everything's away from the piece. I'm going to bring the speed up a little bit more. The bright light also actually showed me out here, is showing me out here on this outside edge where, a little bit better where the edge is at. I'm going to go in here and find the bevel, find a cut, pick up the cut. I'm not being very gentle tonight, I can tell you that. It'll get quite noisy out there because it's flexible. And do that and knock a chunk off of it. I needed to go back considerably further than what I did. Where's the chunk? Right there. And you can see why you get flexibility, because it is flexible. But I want it to be a little bit, I'd like it to be a little bit thinner than that. So if I bring my tool rest in just a little bit closer, we'll take a little bit, take some meat off out here, hopefully. I'm even going to take the 2 seconds out, and I'm going to hone a little bit here on that part of the tool to try and give me the sharpest edge possible without taking the time to go back over to the grinder. And once again, we're going to go back in here on solid material. We're going to find our bevel, where it's going to cut, come out in the air. And that looks like I actually went too far out. I did not want to lose the actual rim. I did. That was always the problem I had with them, is being able to see where this edge is at. So now it's going to be a We'll just take the rest of that edge off. Say what? Go to the swept back grind gouge because I can drop the handle. Now we've lost what we really wanted it to be, or at least most of it. Like there's still a little bit there. I need to take a little bit more off of it. And it'll make it easier for me to pick up, to see where my cut is at. And of course, whatever you do, don't reach up there and touch any of this stuff. Still got more of it. That's a shame. That would have made it look much more organic, I guess you would say. Now we've got it all. Okay. Like I say, we're at about 1/4 of an inch thick right there. That's thicker than what I want it to be. Now, if we could have did that the last time, we'd have been in good shape. So now, we're down to 1/8 of an inch. Real close. I think that's where we're going to leave it. Now, we're just going to keep on using our light as long as we can, because it'll show me where you'll be able to see the difference in color. But now we're going to need to get rid of a bunch of material. And remember, there is a rotten hole running right up through the middle of that sucker. Yep, it does run the whole way up through. Stop and shorten up the distance. Definitely has a rotten spot and a little tiny little crack in there too. Okay, now I'm going to take the time to go sharpen the gouge. Actually, I'll sharpen both these while I'm at it. I won't switch the camera. It'll only take me a minute to do it. But definitely want that to be Want them both to be as sharp as they possibly can to make those final cuts in there. I should give my dad that challenge, that some of these little 6-inch logs, probably where we should have started with playing around with this. Should have started with one of those. And do a couple of them that way. And while I was at it with the 40-degree gouge, I've also taken most of the heel away. The cutting bevel is now about 1/8 of an inch long, which will mean I'll be putting, the idea with that is to be able to put less pressure, as you can see, it's a little bit spongy, I guess you'd call it. I'll get some things out of the road here so I can move my tool rest in. Because once again, I want the tool rest sort of in line with what I'm trying to do. Way it makes it easier, because if a tool rest is going straight across, your tendency is to follow the tool rest. So we'll make that in 2 passes. And I brought that tool rest in just a little close. Can't have the bevel dropping off the tool rest. That would be disaster. Okay. And that should be it. Give it a feel, and hopefully it's not a roller coaster. See, I actually did pretty good, because didn't do what I just did. I heard it crack. I'll show everybody how wiggly it is. You could actually break them. I heard a crack. Because I possibly could have went in there a little bit deeper than what I should have. But we'll take the rest of that out. My eye was telling me that I was beyond this foot in here. And I'm sure that's where that crack came from. I don't see a crack opening up in there, but so it could become a flying saucer. Because once I get inside that foot, then we know we can make that foot we can get down into the foot so that we have a nice transition across there to continue our curve, although it looks like that's what it did. I am paper thin down there right where that edge is at. I think we'll just take that last little bit in the bottom there, and this is probably not going to survive. Because we got a little bit overzealous where we were at in there. Yep, right there it is. You can see that's exactly what I did. I got carried away right there to where it's cracking right along that foot. When I wiggled it, that's thin enough that it cracked right along that foot. That's disappointing. Very disappointing. Because that will not, at that rate, it will not survive. I don't think. We have little radial cracks in there. But it really only cracked in one little place. Well, tomorrow's another day. We're going to try. I'm not going to give up on it. I'm going to try and finish it. So I need some way to flip it around. But thinking that's too big. That's bigger. Yes. Can't do that. Let's see what else I have. That would be smaller. This thing is much smaller. That'll work. Because I want to stay. We know we can't get out beyond that where that foot is at in there. And that's too small for that chuck. Don't have many of them made for the bigger chawls. This is what you do with little off-cut pieces. Make little jam chucks out of everything. Where you become the wood hoarder of the century. This is probably also where we get to see it go flying away, because we know we have this area and that area goes the whole way through. There's probably a dime-sized area right there in the middle that's sort of rotten. You can even see through it at that right there. So chances of being successful with this part of it is probably slim. We will definitely be well out of the line of fire. Although when I get to be really thin like that, if I would have blown through it somewhere in here, it's really not very. It's not as exciting as what you would think, because they just sort of disappear. They just don't. It's not like it's going to explode and fly away. And we thought we had a mark in there, but everything is sort of so rotten that we don't. So let's turn it on nice and slow. Then we're close. I want to try and get it at least relatively close to center. That's going to work. Like I say, it's not going to survive anyhow. Trying to make this concave as well so that it sits out on just on the rim. I'm going to check it at this point. I probably could actually even, yeah, that's more than enough. There's still cracks in it anyhow. This was not necessarily the world's greatest piece to have done this with. Let's get a little bit more. I think when I get very right to the center point, I think is when it's going to, it probably will just stop spinning. At least that's my thought. Or it's going to do like that and blow through. Cool. See, that wasn't very exciting. That's that rotten spot. Where the hell did it go? It just disintegrated. It is thinner right there. But part of it's the rotten spot that was in the center of it that popped through. Because I should be able to, the other piece should be laying here. So we were overachieving in the middle. We got too much of it dished out in the middle to start with, and we had a rotten spot. Because it's not, it is thin, it is a thin spot there. There's no doubt about that. But perfect funnel. It wasn't gonna survive anyhow. There's big radial cracks running up through there. They would probably, this thing as it dried, would probably just continue to crack the whole way up across. And I'll let it sit here and see what it does. But that's 1/8 of an inch. Should be able to go a lot thinner than that. Just have to work on it a little harder. Should be able to, I technically should be able to go half that thickness. But you have to work it. You have to work at getting to that because you can't be putting this would be the class I took with Rudy Lopez. He's really a master at this super thin stuff. And he's like, you just have to keep working at it to where you can just float the bevel and the tool just floats along and not putting any pressure on the side. Because as soon as you put pressure on it, when it's thin like that, it moves. It wants to move. So this is the only way you learn. You learn by your mistakes. In this case, part of it was a shitty kind of piece of wood. I wonder if the other one looks that way. They might become firewood. Because the other one's actually, yeah, it does. Because I cut 2 of them. This one doesn't have quite so big of, but it still has the same thing. Let me go back to the overhead and we'll look at the other one. We'll go to there. Because I have another one, and I shouldn't have. Number one thing, I shouldn't have cut them that thick. I'm not quite sure what I was thinking. They should have only been about 2 inches thick to start with, and these are that's like 3.5. But this one is sort of the same scenario. I'm not going to do it tonight, but maybe in the next day or two. Or I'll get the chainsaw back out and cut some more. I should cut some smaller ones. Start smaller. Like I say, this is off the same log. But it sort of has the same defect as that one did, where that center is rotten. That's actually the pith of the tree, the very center of the tree right there. So that's rotten, and it shows out in here, even though my punch won't necessarily go into it very easy, but I can see this ring. There's a whole ring right here, about the dime size, maybe even a nickel size, that looks like has started to become rotten. This side's even bigger yet. So that was probably really a poor choice in a piece of wood, because that's gonna, like I say, it's hollow now. I don't know that that would be a visually interesting thing to have a hole in the center of a bowl. And it's probably just like the other one. I bet it's, no, that one doesn't look like it's quite centered. So if we guess where center's at, I bet it's close though. So we go to there, to there, too much. There, there. We need to come over to about there. So right about there is sort of a geographic, I guess you would call it, center point there. Which this one's a little bit offset of that, offset of the hole. But I still don't foresee that working. Sort of have to think about that a little bit, but this one doesn't seem to have, that one must have been closer to the end of the log where there is some checks though. There's one there. I don't see any other ones, but I don't know. Tomorrow is another day. Do have to get ready for a yard sale on Saturday, so I don't know if I'll be back tomorrow night or not, to see how easily we get the yard sale stuff taken care of. But at least we got two of them that are worthwhile. Good picture to put on Instagram. Say, well, not everything always works the way they're supposed to. Anybody have any questions, comments? This is being broadcast as well on YouTube. It's under live YouTube, under Kapps Kreations. If you like to watch YouTubes or you want to go back and look at any of the nonsense again, that would be where it would be. You go to the YouTube, if you would go over to the YouTube channel side, it would be great if you could hit that little subscribe button, help that part of the channel grow, because I think eventually we're going to end up being over there all the time. But otherwise, we'll see if we can find anybody to read into. If I can find my mouse. Oh, I need to stop.